The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. I'm assisted today with my best dog friend, Toto. Toto is getting ready for Christmas, as we all are. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different in that we're going to tell a story that has not been published. I haven't done that before. When we created this podcast, we're dreaming it up more than 2.5 years ago. I always thought it might be another way, another forum to tell some of these afterlife interrupted stories without them being published in a book. Maybe they become a next book, who knows? But today we're going to do a story that you haven't heard, even if you've read all the books. This one is a man named Sherman. Sherman, that's actually his last name. He didn't give us his first name. But his Sherman was on a highway, driving at highway speeds, when the highway went into a tunnel. Ahead of him on the road was an 18-wheeler that he said was not an enclosed cab. It was a flat uh, bed, and it was hauling some sort of odd-sized heating or air conditioning equipment, maybe industrial. The problem was that it was an unconventional size, and when it went into the tunnel, it was too tall, and it scraped the top of the tunnel, or it brought the whole thing to a crashing halt. And lots of other cars crashed into this uh, blockage in the tunnel, including the car that he was in, and he died. We get a lot of car crash stories in this forum, the work that we do, my prayer partners and I. But this one stood out because the story is so well told, and because Sherman, in his attitude towards his sudden, abrupt death, might have lessons for us. He was a businessman, he said, and he went through this sudden experience of dying. And I think I'm going to read a little bit from the way that he put it. I really like the way that he did the dream story, for one thing. This one came on the night of March the 28th of 2023. Here's the dream as I received it. I was with someone in a car. We were going into a tunnel. A car in front of us scraped the top of the tunnel. The car overturned. Many other cars collided violently. I went among the vehicles trying to help, but I was no help. Two men were marking where there were dead bodies. I couldn't get my flip phone to work to call anyone. Eventually, a van, like an airport shuttle, took us away from there. But first, I had to gather my luggage. They dropped us off in a seedy section of a city at an old Greyhound bus station. I asked, "Is this Phoenix?" And I awoke. And I added in my book, this one felt very sad. So that's the essence of it. Um, his angel came on the line first, which is very often the way these things work. And his guardian was very proud of him. The guardian went by the name Ralph, and uh, Ralph noted that uh, for those of us who practice Christian faith, that we were coming upon Pentecost time, which he said is a time of expansive spiritual experience and encouraging people to delve deeper into spiritual things. Um, he said he was so proud of the one that he assisted. Sherman was an adult man. He was married and had kids. He didn't say how old they were, um, but they didn't sound like newborns. Anyway, um, some of the detail in his story, the flip phone, for example, is kind of a tee off. I mean, how long did you have a flip phone? For just a few years, maybe right around the end of the previous century and maybe the first 10 years in the 21st century. Um, he he, um, he did this thing that people sometimes do when they have the disorientation that comes with abrupt death or even approaching death. Any of you who have worked in hospice work or have been around deathbeds know that sometimes people who can still verbalize at the time of their death will make reference to being in some sort of waiting station, being at the bus station or being waiting for a cab or being at waiting for your plane to take off. Very often people are concerned with luggage, car keys, phones. They know they're about to go somewhere and they don't want to leave until they've collected everything that they would normally take with them. Anyway, he was doing that out of body after, immediately after his own death. And then in the dream, he said eventually a van came, and he later explained at an airport, you don't just get into any old vehicle that comes by. You get in the one that's designed to take you back to your car or where you need to go. So he said that a van came for him, and it came for other people too. And it was the right van to be in. He didn't have a problem with that, but it dropped them off in what he thought was the seedy section of Phoenix. And so it wasn't a desirable place to be. But the thing that makes him so interesting is he's a businessman and he approached things in a very methodical, professional, business-like way, even though he had just died in a sudden tragic death. He explained to us, he said, I was a professional person and I might have had a fight with my wife or I kicked the dog on the way out the door. I don't think he sounded like a person who would actually kick a dog, and that wouldn't be a thing to do, would it? We don't kick dogs around here. But he was saying, you don't bring anger to the workplace. You draw a line between your personal life and your professional life. And he said, that's the attitude I took towards being out of body. It wasn't that I wasn't suddenly, grief stricken about having died unexpectedly and being separated. It's just that in the moment, there were things to be done that needed to be done well and that demanded my full attention. So he really just did set aside the emotional content of what was going on around him in order to focus on being where he was or getting where he needed to be, paying attention to the new circumstance, taking it all in, and making good decisions. I really admired that. Anyway, his guardian praised him for that and said, the guardian said something like, I knew very well that I was guarding a mortal, and that there are times when we guardians can protect them from things like auto collisions, but not always. But he said, I stayed at my post. I knew my job. The guardian was very much like him, like Sherman, methodical, task-oriented, um, professional, if you would, and said he's done such a good job of moving through what's happened to him. And he said, I'm excited for him because this is his day. So um, that we're having a little growl here because there is a dog daring to walk down the street. What do you think about that? I feel very safe and protected. I've got 7 pounds of dog flesh here ready to stand between me and anything that might try to harm me, my own little guardian. Anyway, he explained that in his afterlife that he was in the company of competent people who were taking good care of him. Um, he said, I knew, it wasn't that I didn't love my family. It's just that I needed to focus on my new set of circumstances. And he sort of grieved off to the side. And he said, I don't need any help with that. Said, "Oh, I'm here today because I'm told that you people help people move from one place to the next, and it's time for that." So it turned out that the person who came for him, he said, I've been standing in this line. They do call it that. And he said, I've watched you and your prayer partners help other people cross, and I'm familiar with what you do. That sometimes you train people to think about who they'd most like to be welcomed by, but oftentimes you also it just encourage them to uh, be still and see who shows up and be surprised at who comes for them. Well, he did that, and the person who came for, he was surprised when he saw it. It was Merle. Merle was an older woman who was his travel agent in the days before we all had our own computers. And when you had to go to a small storefront and get the help of somebody who had a computer that could access airline schedules, and then you'd sit with them and you'd tell them what the parameters were, what you were trying to do, and then they would give you options and help ticket you. She said Merle learned enough computing in order to do the part that she really liked was the adventure part. She just she really liked the brochures and she liked enticing people to go places. And he explained that sometimes travel agents of that period were sometimes given heavily discounted trips to resorts and cruises or whatever so that they could have a firsthand experience to be able to tell potential clients, you really ought to do this. This was a terrific trip. So anyway, Merle loved helping people have adventures, and she was a professional. So it was a good match. He was behaving very professionally. He wanted somebody that was good at arranging for new travel, and Merle came along. And she didn't stay very long. She was just task oriented to help him relocate or to go on a trip. So that's the essence of this story. We're going to go into it in more detail in future podcasts. Um, but you know, when we do that, we break it down into what we call compassionate response, and then another podcast in a trilogy that we call spiritual practice. He didn't bring up religion at all. That's not uncommon. Um, but he brought up freedom and focus. He felt like being able to separate out uh, emotions was really important in the workplace, that you set aside your personal life, your home life, and whatnot, so that you can focus on the task in the workplace. And that was, he just felt that that was a very helpful way, or at least the way that he chose to move. He did say that that van that came from, he said it did pick up other people, um, and it did bring us to one place, but it wasn't, there was nothing about it that suggested that you have to be in conformity. You don't have to do this like everybody else does. And, you know, you get on a van like that, and as soon as you get off, everybody goes their own way and does whatever it is they do, that you weren't grouped necessarily for any other reason except to get you from point A to point B. So that's part of his story. Um, I think in the subsequent podcasts, I want to focus some on his guardian because his guardian was really funny, and then on himself. We do a second interview. We go back and ask them. We go back into protected prayer and ask them, "Is it okay for us to tell your story?" And we did that only yesterday, so it's very fresh in my mind. So just had an opportunity to speak with him again. Um, One funny little thing is, if you're my age or older, do you remember Bullwinkle? It was a children's cartoon from the early 60s and maybe middle 60s. It had different kind of sequence. Bullwinkle and Rocky the Flying Squirrel was one of them, but I think it was like an hour-long show, but it had different component parts. And one of them was a dog, yeah, a doggy named Sherman, who was also a college professor, and he loved world geography and maybe anthropology. And this dog would spin a globe and it would land on some country, and then there would ensue maybe a 7 to 10 minute segment on some cartoon that was happening in this other country that taught a child about some foreign land. Well, anyway, this dog appeared to be very bright, and his name was Sherman. Well, I have a friend who is not named Sherman, but somewhere in his childhood, somebody decided that he sounded very smart for his age or something and called him Sherman, and it stuck into his adult life. And so he became Sherman to a circle of friends that includes me. But anyway, Sherman was very bright, and I think that his story will be instructive. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. This will be a short episode, but I'd like you to look forward to getting to know Sherman, his angel, Ralph, and his afterlife travel agent, Merle, who's still on the job, still helping people get uh, onto fun adventures. So thank you for being part of this brief episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time. Remember, you can always contact me if you want to through my website, nathan-castle.com. There's a contact icon button there where all you have to do is send me an email. I do ask that if you are new to the work that my prayer partners and I do, that you read at least one book in the Afterlife Interrupted series before contacting me and asking questions. I'd rather us have a really rich conversation, and I think that's facilitated by being a little more familiar with this uncommon work. But for right now, that's it. So for my friend Toto and myself, Father Nathan, remember that I'm praying for you, and I particularly pray for the healing within you of anything that is distressing. But for now, that's it. I'll see you next time. God bless you. Bye bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.